Alright, hello everyone, I'm John from Nickname Gaming, and I had a member ask me how we make pop-ups. So I've come up with this great pop-up tutorial that is going to take you through 3 different ways of making pop-ups, and I'll do my best to explain how you can customize these. So just to give you an idea of what we are working with, I've created this little demo scene, and as you see there's going to be a verify click, an on hover, and a notification event. Now I'm not going to build these with you because that would be more time consuming than needed, but I will walk you through everything. So the verify click, you click it, just verification, and it actually asks, can you click yes? And then you have 2 buttons, yes and no. And then if you click one of them, so if I click yes, then we see pasted in my console, they clicked yes. If I try it again, but this time I click no, it will say they clicked no. And we are actually doing a cool thing in that using things like Unity events, and you'll see that. Now on the on hover we have a little pop-up when I hover over it, and this is just a text box, and I'll talk to you about these things called iPointer events, which are these wonderful things that you can do many things with. And finally we have the notify event, and if you'll notice, it actually creates a new scene when I use this. So it says hello, I click the screen, and you'll see that this entire scene will disappear once I click. And there we go. So what that does is it loads a thing called an additive scene. So I have this pop-up scene that I use as an additive scene. So I kind of layer my scenes. I have this and I just layer it on top. So without further ado, I want to start walking you through what I did in my scenes. You can, and again, this is just to kind of let you know. So of course I have my camera, I have my canvas, I have my event system. Game controller is not needed, that's something from another part of this project. But okay, yeah, title. Now for my on click, it's just a button or an image and a piece of text. The image has a button attached to it, which is running my on local verify click function, which we'll see later. My on hover, however, has my input field holding my on hover controller script, which has a link to the pop-up image. And this pop-up image, you can see, is just anchored right on top of the element itself, with just a little tooltip of passwords must have 9 characters. So if you want to have a tip like that. And on hover works on Android too, it just works like an on click. So you click it once on Android and it counts as hover, but you click it again and it counts as you no longer hovering. It's an interesting thing on Android, and it definitely changes from device to device. Okay, and the last thing is my event notification, which, much like the on click, is just an image with a piece of text with the image holding a button, which opens my on remote one. Now let's go into my notifications. For my local notification, I have a notification canvas with a background image that kind of adds a grayness to the whole thing. You can see I have it at about a 50 alpha with full black otherwise. And then on this, and I will show you code to use all of this, we have the holder image, the kind of background, the title, then I use a vertical layout group because I want the text to grow and shrink based on my buttons. So see how it grows when I turn them off. And then I of course have just the notification button and just the verification button. So I can turn those on and off, and my details text is using a auto size. Okay. On the canvas itself, it has my local notification controller. Let me kind of move my head over so we can see it. So we see that I grab a hold of the background image, which is what I use to turn on and off the entire notification canvas. So if I turn this off, the whole thing turns off, but I still leave the canvas on, because on the canvas I put a don't destroy on load. I hate that. I wish it was do not destroy on load. Anyways, I also keep track of the notification title, the notification content, my notification button holder, and my verification button holder. You also see that I have this on accept. Let me move to the other side for this. And this is the same thing that you see in a button. So this has a event system where you can assign things to this just like you're assigning to a button, which I find really interesting. Okay, and let me go into my next scene, the scene that I layered on top, and you'll notice that it's very similar to the previous one, and I don't have anything fancy. It's just the title, the details. I have the button here, but I've turned it off, but just to show that you can have it if you want. And on the canvas, I just have my notification controller with the title and content. Now, let me go through the actual script with you. So for my pop-up controller, first I have an enum of my scene names. I like to do this when I load scenes with the scene manager. I use an enum, and then anytime I want to access that scene, I will grab from the enum. Other things you can do is you can load the integer of the scene, and you can load like the ID of the scene, or you can just use a solid string. But all of those are completely non-descriptive, and I really don't like them. So what you can see here is I do something like scene manager load scene, the scene name enum.popupscene.toString. So I have another one where I have like 6 or 10 different game scenes, and keeping track of all of the names of that would be really hard. However, if I ever decide to change a game scene name, or I decide to remove the game, then all I have to do is go here, right-click, rename, and it will rename the scene name enum.popupscene everywhere throughout my entire project. Likewise, if I ever wanted to remove a scene altogether, I can just delete it, and I would get the error everywhere in my project, and that would really help me find it. I'm also using a thing called a namespace. So if you ever want to publish an asset to the Unity Asset Store, then you should use a namespace and everything, and that just kind of helps separate your code into blocks better, or areas or regions. Okay, now, yeah, these are pretty simple. So on local verify click, it gets the instance of my local notification controller, and it runs the function set local notification controller with the title verification, the content can you click yes, and then it sends this callback function, this Unity action as you will, which receives a Boolean value. And so I just use this bool value with a lambda expression, this thing where it says bool value equals greater than is called a lambda expression, if you didn't know. And all that does is print, but here you can do infinitely other things with what you want to happen. Now for my on remote notify click, we'll look at this much later, but it calls my pop-up data to set data with the title of hello and the content world. And then it loads my scene. And my scene, the pop-up scene, will run a function on start. So once it is loaded into the scene and is at the first frame after it's loaded, or the first frame, after it was loaded, it will pretty much get my pop-up data, which is a static field, but we'll look into that. The first thing I really want to look into is my hover controller, because that's basic. I use a thing called an iPointerEnter event iPointerEnter handler and iPointerExit. So this is when your mouse enters an area and exits an area. It will call that. And if you've never heard of iPointer events, it's from the Unity Engine event system, and I definitely recommend going and reading about them, because it is a wonderful thing. And as you see, we have iPointer click when you click, iPointer down when the pointer goes down, iPointer move when the mouse starts moving over the object, iPointer up when you let the mouse up again, so you can do a drag and drop very easily that way. And I've actually used that for things like my Match 3 games. And then just a capture event to get the mouse area. Okay, so that's a little thing on iPointer. Next, I get I use serialized field to get an instance of my onHover pop-up. So that is the background image that has the text on top of it that says password must contain 9 characters. And I just do this very simple thing where I set active to true, which means I turn it on in the game scene, and then I set active to false, which means I turn it off. And that's just on pointer enter when you move your mouse over, it turns on, and on pointer exit, it turns it off when your mouse leaves. Next, I have my local notification controller that I want to show you, and I went a bit overboard on this, so bear with me. So what I do is, the first most important thing is I have my internal static local notification controller instance. Now you can use public here, but I like to use internal instead of public, just because internal is more secure. Secure from who knows, or what. Then my awake. So this runs before start. So the awake, I say if the instance of this static controller has not been set. If it is null, then I say the instance is equal to this, and I say do not destroy this on load, which means when I change scenes, when I go to a different scene, not an additive scene, but an entirely different scene, this local notification controller will always be on screen. Now, using Don't Destroy on Load comes with an inherent challenge, which is you can end up having infinitely many local notification controllers in one scene by going back and forth between scenes. So what I do then is I say, if the instance is not null and the instance is not equal to this local notification controller, then I destroy the game object of the local notification controller. And you do want to say destroy game object and not destroy this, because destroy this will destroy the script attached to the game object and not the game object itself. And so if you have issues, make sure that you are destroying the game object. Next, I have an override of my set local notification controller, which is, as you saw, was what I used to turn this on. So the first one, I only take the content, so I don't care about the title. Then I turn my notification on, so it just gives you content and you click OK. Then I get the title, content, and the number of seconds until it closes. So this would set the title, set the content, it would let you click a button to close it, or it will wait the number of seconds to close. So we can look through here. It says I set my background object to true, so that's when I turn it on and show you the whole notification. I set my content text to my content. I set my title text to my title. I turn on the notification buttons so you can close it before the time. I turn off my verifications because I don't want anything verified. It's just a look at this notification. And then I do a thing called start coroutine. Now, start coroutine will run an IEnumerator function, which I call close after seconds, and I take a float value of the number of seconds that I want for it to take. Then I yield return new wait for seconds, so I wait that amount of time, and after that number of time passes, then I set my object to false. So this is the same as doing it in the update function. Now you need to be careful using IEnumerators in this fashion, because if I were to turn on 5 notifications, not only would it override my notifications, but the last notification would close at the end of the first timer, which is not something you want. So you might even want something like stop coroutine, and then you would actually need to get an instance of this, because if we see this passes a coroutine, so we would have something like a coroutine, I don't know, C equals like this, but I would have it, in my variables up top, and then here I would say stop coroutine, and then I would pass the C coroutine like that, and it would stop the coroutine. Now, in the past, you could just send the IEnumerator function you wanted to stop, or even the name of the coroutine, but that has not worked for me, oddly enough. Okay, now the thing that I do actually run in my example is my set local notification controller, which takes a title, a content, and then a Unity action, which returns a Boolean value, and I call it onAccept. And we actually see that I have my Unity event. Now, a Unity event is just like the button events, where it can take many functions to it. You just click the plus and add on to it. I couldn't actually click the plus because my face is in the way right now. Face over there, because I've got the mirrored video. Anyways, so yeah, then I do all that. I set the notification button to false, verification button to true. Then I say if my onAccept is not null, if I have not made a mistake, then I add the listener of onAccept. And look how I use the this and no this. So this.onAccept refers to my local notification controller Unity event onAccept, while onAccept with no this refers to the value or the variable that I passed into my function. And the last thing is my onAccept, which is added onto my buttons on the notification, which just says, is it an accept button? And I will set the background object to false, turning off this local notification. And I say onAccept question mark. That question mark is like a null check. It's the same thing as saying if onAccept does not equal null, then do this. So if onAccept is not equal to null, then I want to invoke my functions. This will run every single function in the Unity event, and it will send the isAccept parameter to it. And then I say if the onAccept is not null, then remove all of the listeners. So you see here that I add a listener. Well, when it's done, I remove the listener. Otherwise, you will have a new listener added every single time. And if you remove this and run it, one time it will show, what was I saying? I said they clicked yes. It will show they clicked yes one time. If you run it a second time, it will say they clicked yes 2 times. So then you would have 3 of them in your console, and it would go on from there. Okay, but that's my local notification controller. I'll upload it to my GitHub so you can read it there, even take the code if you want. Next is my pop-up data. I give the title and content, some basic stuff, and this is just a static class that I use to pass data from one mono behavior class to another, and these can be in completely different scenes with no way to communicate, but they can communicate through a static class like this. And I just use the set data, so I don't have to say popupdata.title equals popupdata.content equals. I can just say popupdata.setData equals hello world, as you saw. Now that takes us to our last thing, my notification controller, which is fairly simple. I just take the title and the content, and then I use another iPointer. I use my iPointer click handler, which will find any clicks on my canvas, and it will unload the scene. Now you see that I use unload scene async because unload scene is depreciated, which I find odd. And even though I'm unloading an additive scene, I do not have to say that it's an additive scene that I'm unloading, and you see that it still works perfectly fine. So that's my little tutorial on creating notifications. I hope that this has been educational for you. I hope that it's inspired you to make some notifications. I will add a link to my GitHub. If you have any questions or any other tutorials that you would like to see, I would love to see it in the comments. So thank you for watching and have a great day.